Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Bloodborne lore series. Last episode we talked about the Pthumerians in regard to their origins and also Loran. With that basis now explained, I'd like to move on to two questions that have puzzled me throughout my various playthroughs. Number 1, what is the Eldritch Truth? And number 2, why do some Pthumerians look the way that they do? I know a lot of people have an idea of what the Eldritch Truth is, essentially the knowledge that humans and Great Ones share the same plane of existence. But I'd like to go a little further and have a look at some real-world examples to understand it better. This will inevitably lead us to the physiology of the Pthumerians and why they have the Pthumeru look, for lack of a better term. This video will be speculative in some ways, but I will make sure to let you know when I'm about to come out with some crazy balls-out theory. This will also be a continuation of sorts from my previous video on the Pthumerians, so make sure you've seen that. I'll link it in the description. I'd like to begin by discussing the Graveguard set. The unique and interesting set has a description that reads, Mask of Dorez, Graveguard of the Forbidden Woods. His pale countenance mimics the Labyrinth Watchers. Willem kept two loyal servants back at Bergenworth. When they were sent into the Labyrinth, they encountered the Eldritch Truth and went mad. One became the password gatekeeper, while Doris became a Graveguard of the forest. Doris, as we can read, was a loyal servant of Master Willem, and was sent into the Chalice dungeons at some point, going mad shortly afterwards. I think it's very important that we look at the chronology here. When they were sent into the Labyrinth, they encountered the Eldritch Truth, and went mad. This is a very straightforward explanation of how their madness was actually acquired. From this, I believe that those who discover the Eldritch Truth go mad if they are unprepared for the revelation. We will be discussing this revelation in more detail shortly. We can tie these thoughts to the physiology of the Pthumerians by rereading part of the description of the mask, which states, His pale countenance mimics the Labyrinth Watchers. Now, the word countenance is important here. It is easy to assume that the word is just referring to the mask itself, but countenance quite literally means face. If it were referring to the mask, it would say, the pale countenance mimics the Labyrinth Watchers, but it doesn't, which makes me believe that Doris's face actually looks like this, to an extent. Cicero, Roman philosopher, once said that the countenance is the portrait of the soul. In the case of Dorez, I really couldn't agree more. I would also like to put forth is the possibility that the Pthumeru look of pale skin, black eyes and open mouth may be caused by a shocking cosmic revelation, a sudden, overwhelming moment of truth, the Eldritch Truth to be exact. This first thought came to me when I remembered a famous piece of art by Edvard Munch, The Scream. The painting, created in 1893, depicts a man holding his face in terror, eyes wide and mouth agape, screaming below a sanguine sky. Fortunately for this analysis, Munch wrote a poem later to accompany the painting, which I will read to you now. I was walking along the road with two friends. The sun was setting. Suddenly, the sky turned blood red. I paused, feeling exhausted, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and tongues of fire above a blue-black fjord, and the city. My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. Anyone who has played Bloodborne will notice the uncanny comparisons between this poem and elements of the game, especially that of the fiery red sky. What Munch seems to have experienced here is an epiphany of sorts. An epiphany is defined as a sudden or striking realization, often used to describe a breakthrough of scientific, religious, or philosophical nature, and it could be argued that the Eldritch Truth applies to all three. Let me now bring your attention to the Pthumeru root Chalice. Part of its description reads, The old labyrinth was carved out by the Pthumerians, superhuman beings that are said to have unlocked the wisdom of the Eldritch Truth. Now, to me, the fact that the Pthumerians had to unlock the wisdom of the Eldritch Truth implies to me that they had to earn it some way or another, that this was not something meant to just be found unceremoniously. If physiology is tied to the Eldritch Truth, it affects some in different ways. For instance, the Pthumerian elder and descendant have the gaping mouth, while Queen Yharnam does not. A case could be made that the truth affects people differently based on gender, but I do not think that this is the case, as we find the female sages in the Chalice dungeons, blood saints of the healing church who have gone insane, attacking any intruders they come across. The sages are a fascinating element on their own, and something I'd like to talk about further in a future video, maybe focusing on the morality of the healing church. To truly understand in detail the point at which the Eldritch Truth is discovered, we need to look at a couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the ancient Mesopotamian civilization, Sumer. The real-world Sumerians share many commonalities to the Pthumerians. One interesting factor of Sumerian religion was their perceived understanding of the universe. They believed that the universe was a closed dome surrounded by a deep, primordial saltwater sea. This is not dissimilar from certain imagery and runes depicted in Bloodborne. Something that is hinted continually throughout the game is the Great Ones and their connection to bodies of water, and just water in general. Consider the Lake Runes, Rom's boss area at Byrgenwerth Manor, the dialogue of the Blood Saints in the DLC, and so on. Specifically, we can even look at the Great One Cold Blood, which resembles the cosmos/the stars surrounded and drowning in blood, very reminiscent of the Sumerian belief system. Where we truly begin our understanding of the Eldritch Truth and what protects it is the Lake Rune, which has a description that reads, "Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep, and an augur of the Eldritch Truth. Overcome this hindrance and seek what is yours." Bulwark basically means a defensive wall, so we can deduce that water or lakes exist as a border between our world and perhaps the Eldritch Truth. Augur is an interesting word to use as well. It can be used as a verb, which is when something has the action of describing events to come, such as the end of the Cold War seemed to augur well, and the other meaning of augur is much more fitting and fits the sentence structure better in regard to the Lake Rune. An augur was a position in Roman society which was responsible of determining the will of the gods through the actions of animals. We can apply this meaning to the water serving as a defensive wall, guarding an augur or soothsayer of the Eldritch Truth, basically someone who is able to discern the nature of the truth as it appears to have a will of its own. Worth mentioning as well is the progression of the Lake Rune in the ones you collect. First it is just the lake, and then fading lake, then dissipating lake, and lastly Great Lake. It seems to me that the bulwark, this defensive layer, is fading away and revealing the Great Lake, the purveyor of the Eldritch Truth itself. We also have the Deep Sea Rune, which similarly discusses the importance of water. While the descriptions are mostly the same, what is interesting is that the strength of the runes are the opposite of the Lake Rune in terms of adjective. They progress as the following: clear, stunning, and great. There is an entire motif regarding incoagulable liquids that runs through Bloodborne, and the Lake Runes as well, but that is such a huge rabbit hole of lore that I'd like to avoid it for the moment. The main thing that I wanted to point out is that the Eldritch Truth is protected by water, perhaps entire oceans. Could this be why tunneling into the earth was done to discover the Eldritch Truth? It's possible. Something I mentioned earlier that I'd like to discuss is the concept of epiphany, and its connection to the Great Ones, the cosmos, and the Eldritch Truth as a whole. The word epiphany is specifically used in Bloodborne to describe the Eldritch Truth. I draw your attention to the cosmic Eye Watcher badge and the Great One's wisdom. The description of the badge reads, "The choir stumbled upon an epiphany, very suddenly and quite by accident. Here we stand, feet planted in the earth, but might the cosmos be very near us, only just above our heads?" This is the Eldritch Truth. This is the realization. The moment at which the choir discovered the truth that caused them to feel no remorse or have any second thoughts regarding the terrible choices they would make, dooming Yharnam. Epiphany is a word that has been used since the 14th century to describe a feeling of great enlightenment or realization, to see not the divine itself, but through the divine. Perhaps the most crucial visual example of this can be seen in the Flammarion Engraving, a wood engraving constructed by an unknown artist which depicts an earthly traveller reaching the end of a flat earth, and pushing his head through the firmament, seeing the heavens and cosmos above him. Now, the firmament is a word used to describe as the veil between the world of man and the cosmos of the gods in biblical cosmology. Let's compare this to the progression of Bloodborne. Firstly, the sun sets, night begins, and finally the blood moon descends, and the veil between the Great Ones and the humans is at its weakest point. The firmament becomes breached, and the Eldritch Truth takes effect. Willem had a moment similar to the choir. It is said in the description of the Great One's wisdom that, at Byrgenwerth, Master Willem had an epiphany. We are thinking on the basest of planes. What we need are more eyes. Willem understood that one would need to be prepared in order to accept the Eldritch Truth, and that is to approach it without one's mind prepared could result in irreparable madness. Essentially, insight, which prepares the mind for horrors unknown. Think of the tomb prospectors who wear the madman's garb, of whom it is said, "Most tomb prospectors, members of the healing church chosen to explore the old labyrinth, are unable to withstand the weight of the old knowledge, and go mad." The knowledge of the Eldritch Truth has a literal weight to it that can break minds entirely. It is then understandable that Master Willem arrived at the conclusion that more eyes could aid one in reconciling the Eldritch Truth. However, the realization of this truth was not completely welcome, and Byrgenwerth's adage came to reflect that: fear the old blood. This is echoed through the description of kin cold blood, which reads, "Dare not to delve into the world beyond humanity," the Eldritch Truth touched upon long ago at Byrgenwerth. A similar insight that we can make about the Pthumerians by using the madman's knowledge comes from the following. Making contact with Eldritch wisdom is a blessing, for even if it drives one mad, it allows one to serve a grander purpose, for posterity. What grander purpose is being referred to? I believe it is in reference to becoming a watcher of the tombs. To preserve something for posterity means to preserve something for the benefit of future generations or offspring. The Pthumerians thus protect the tombs in order to allow the memory and knowledge of the Great Ones to live on, after they have been privy to the Eldritch Truth. All in all, the concepts presented in Bloodborne are those similar to those that have been puzzled over by the greatest minds of our time, but thankfully with less at stake for us lore hunters. Given the obscure nature of Bloodborne, I'd love to hear what you have to think in the comments below or on Twitter. I honestly believe that not all the mysteries of Bloodborne have been discovered yet, and there is a large amount of information that I would still like to put into future videos. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to see covered in the future. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.